What's that sound? It's for amusement only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. So, Sophie and I have finished fixing the Universal 5-Star. The Universal 5-Star is a kind of proto-bingo. It has bingo cards which are 3x3, so a bit more manageable than the typical 5x5 bingo card. But the big deal with this playfield layout is that instead of the balls being trapped as soon as you launch the first ball and a shutter board closing off the various holes in the playfield, the holes remain open throughout the entire game. So on a typical bingo pinball machine, you are able to only get one number one time. But on this game, you can hit the same number multiple times. And I can attest that there is little more frustrating than hitting 11 twice because, there's no way to block the shot. So this game had an interesting problem, and I thought it was worth repeating for the show here. There was a wire that had to be wire nutted between the head and the playfield. And I've worked on a few games that have had something like this. And there's generally a broken wire somewhere on the way to the female portion of the Jones plug. So I fully expected that would be the problem, but as Sophie and I dug into it, I taught her how to read schematics and taught her how to solder, and we were looking at that particular circuit, and nothing was making sense. There's a 0 position switch on the ball count unit that was wire nutted to the playfield ball count step-up switches. And I couldn't make sense of it, and the ball count wasn't stepping up. So I found this pretty odd and relatively suspect. And looking at the schematic, both sides of that switch were supposed to go to a particular area, and essentially all they were supposed to do is step up the ball count. Thankfully, the labels still existed under the playfield to tell us what the switches were supposed to do, because otherwise it would be a little difficult. There are stacks of 3 or 4 different switches which do different things under each number, and so it's not immediately obvious without those labels what the switch in question is supposed to do. But anyway, this is the ball count switch, and all it was supposed to do was provide the 30 volts to the ball count unit step-up coil. And so I had her unhook the wire nut and take the wire and use a jumper plug with alligator clips, just a jumper wire, and connect it to a 30 volt source, and there's a coil right beside there, which we used. Did that, fired up the game, and guess what? Bang, worked right away, no problem. So Sophie soldered it to that place, unhooked the wire that was in question, and now there's nothing running outside of the Jones plugs, and the game does function. There is still a race condition which happens in the game, and I haven't had a chance to look back at the schematic yet and work with Sophie and try to figure this out. But there's a problem that can happen if the ball count unit is at 0, where the game will never cycle. So this normally can't happen. The way the game keeps track of balls is actually pretty ingenious, and it won't actually increment the ball count until after a ball is in one of the playfield pockets. So there's not a way where you can start a game and then start another game right away. You have to play at least one ball, and that moves it off of the 0 position on the ball count unit. Well, if it's stuck on the 0 position, for whatever reason, and I'll give an example here, the game will never reset. For some reason, the way the logic is wired, if it's already on 0, it thinks that it needs to keep resetting, but it won't actually proceed to that part of the reset cycle, and it will remain on decrementing the available credits. It'll just lock on the decrement coil on the credit unit, which is pretty weird, but that's how it works. So there's some kind of problem, and I don't know, like I say, if it's a bug in the way the machine is wired, because I don't see any logic, at a glance that says, oh yeah, if the game happens to be at 0 position, bypass all this stuff. No, it shows that it's supposed to go through everything every time, and there's not, for example, a limit switch which would prevent that. Kind of like that switch that was unhooked. And you might say, well, that's pretty obvious, but it's not. That switch doesn't appear on the schematic, and it seems kind of questionable as to what's going on. But anyway, the way that I managed to get it into this situation was to play a game, and then fire up another game. And this game has a ball lift elevator, which is pretty unusual for the time period. Most of the very early bingos had manual lifts, and so this is very impressive that it has a ball elevator, and it's an extremely tall one. It has to lift the ball so very far. It's amazing, and it lifts it straight up, so it's like a real elevator. Seeing this thing in action, it's pretty cool. But anyway, had it lift a ball to the playfield. And remember, the ball count is at 0 at this point. It only increments as soon as that ball goes down through the playfield. So I turned the game off and back on, and then I pushed the replay reset button, which knocks off about 10 credits at a clip. And then tried to start a game. Guess what? Locked on. So that's not a situation that can happen normally, and I don't believe it'll be a situation that can happen at any show. But I am curious to know if it's actually a flaw in the way the game was created, or if it's a flaw that I introduced by having Sophie solder that wire where it goes. So it's unclear at the moment, but I am excited to dig into it further. So, in other news, that game, Universal's 5-star, will be headed with me to the York show, courtesy of Dennis Total. And aside from Universal's 5-star, the multi-bingo will make another return appearance. And this year, for the very first time, multi-races will be making an appearance. Now, multi-races will be essentially at the level of polish that the multi-bingo was for its first show. And for those who don't remember, about 4 years ago now, it made its first appearance at the York show, and it had 16 games total. And the art package was nowhere near done. There was no backglass surround, so it was just a plain monitor that you could see, and that was it. But obviously the shell of the game was there, and the gameplay was there, and people could see what I was going for. This one is going to be a bit more polished. I've gone through and added not just rules and not just lit elements, but I've added animations, full animations, and sequences for those animations and portioning for all the games that I've added so far. My plan is to have 10 games ready for York. I have just finished the 8th game, so this is a truly attainable goal. But I do have some physical modifications left to make for the game before it comes to York. So some of those modifications are as follows. There are 5 or 6 player-controlled buttons that I need to add to the lock bar. In order to do that, I need to have special brackets installed with spoon switches, and I need to install the buttons themselves in the lock bar. To do that, I have to drill, and I'm planning to use some fairly thick, heavy washers along with C-clips to hold the buttons in place. So we'll see if I can get that done. I'm a little nervous about that, despite using calipers and measuring things out. I'm definitely a measure 16 times and cut once kind of person. But even still, the potential for a mistake is pretty high, and there's not a way for me to easily get a replacement lock bar should this go awry. So, hoping that things will work out great. That's one item. I have a new Switch 16 board and a new PD16 board, which need to go in there as well. This will bring the number of Switch 16 boards up to 4 and the number of driver boards up to 2. With that, I should have all the room that I need to continue, but I need to make some hardware modifications to take advantage of that as well. Wire up new switches and so forth. In the back box, I have some additions to make as well. I have a replay register, which I need to clean and then mount in the back box, and this is going to provide the sound for replay games. The payout games are already handled through the existing wiring, which I modified to work with a relay. And I do need to add a couple switches on the payout mechanism itself so that it knows when it has paid, but that will come soon enough. And then aside from that, it's really just playtesting like crazy and making sure the thing actually functions the way that I want it to. I have done some playtesting of the first game, Turf King, that I implemented within the system, but with so many games with their own rule sets and various combinations of things that I need to test, it's going to be quite challenging to get that all done. So that's why I'm committing to just a flat 10. It's a nice round number. It is actually about 1/6 of the total number of games that need to be implemented. And some of those games don't have backlash photos anywhere that I can find online or owners that I'm aware of. So without that, I'm not going to be able to implement all 60 of the games. But I should be able to get a large chunk. Anyway, my point being that this is about 1/6 of the total output of these horse race games. And I'm looking forward to the public's reaction. So if you are available, please come by the Coin-Op Carnival booth, which will be at the White Rose Gameroom show in York, Pennsylvania, and say hello and play the games as part of Bingo Row. So Bingo Row this year is going to have some pretty great games from the folks that I've talked to, and I'm looking forward to them all getting firmed up and ready to go. So it's a little early for me to be announcing game titles yet, but I am very excited about the lineup this year. It should be very interesting and quite a few games that we haven't had before in the lineup. So looking forward to it, and I'm sure there will be some returning classics as well. So please come on by, play the games, and say hello. I'm looking very much forward to it. In other news, I sold a couple games. United's Caravan and Genco's Junior are out of the game room at the moment. I desperately need the space in order to keep building games. That's the big problem, is that building games requires a lot of space. You essentially need at least the size of 2 pinball machines in order to make one. And it really weighs on me when I have to crawl under and around machines in order to get to the back box to do something in a game. So this was a needed move, but it is always a little bittersweet. Thankfully, both games went to great homes. Junior went to Caitlin Pascal, whom you've heard about before on the podcast, and she runs a prewar booth at the Ottawa Pinball and Gameroom show, which runs on September 21st and 22nd of 2019. I'm looking forward to seeing pictures of the event. Unfortunately, I'm unable to attend, but I hope to see lots of smiling faces playing Genco's Junior. In other Genco news, I don't think I mentioned on the podcast, but I did fix the problem with Golden Nugget, and that is now a fully working machine. Golden Nugget had a very interesting problem in that the transformer was outputting every voltage necessary except for 30 volts AC. It was outputting all the DC voltages just fine, and everything was working properly as far as lamps and so forth. It's just this 30 volts AC, which happens to run all the motors in the game, that was causing a problem. So troubleshot that all the way back to the transformer, and unfortunately this is an older transformer where the leads are actually wired up inside the transformer and then shielded and brought out as a wire that's hooked up outside of the transformer. That was a very awkward explanation, but essentially there are no transformer lugs, as you might know them. So I figured there was, a break in that wire somewhere, but the problem is I would have to unwind the transformer in order to know. This is, deep in the bowels of the transformer, and there was no easy way for me to test it. I knew it was bad somewhere between the inside of the transformer and the outside of the transformer. So posted on RGP, and I don't think I conveyed the message very well. But I was hoping that somebody might have a spare, and then maybe I could just swap it in, utilizing my same selenium rectifier, which is actually in fantastic shape in this game, which is pretty unusual. But unfortunately, that was not the case. So I decided to just take a chance and cut the wire that led into the transformer as close to the transformer body as I could, and then just put a new wire on and see what happened. Well, I lucked out. That wire happened to have a break somewhere in the piece that I cut out. So the new wire that I wired in did the trick, and the game is back to life. It's a pretty fun game. It's very challenging. Essentially, there is a conveyor belt on the right side of the game that runs continuously, and it brings balls up, 6 balls in a row, and they roll over a switch at the top of this chute, and that switch increments the ball count unit. As they come down, they bounce against this flipper, which is mounted on the side, and you can flip it, and it gives you a tiny bit of control as the balls kind of hop down into one of the lanes below. And there are 13 lanes that the ball can go down, and of course you can hit the same number twice. So there's a very irritating feeling that you can get with that game, just like with Universal's 5-Star, where you hit the same number several times in a row and you just curse yourself because you know that you could have done it slightly differently. So as the ball comes down, you want to guide it into one set or the other. So there's 6 numbers on either side of this center lane, and the numbers are red or green, and you want to have them sequentially on either the red or the green side. If you get 1, 2, and 3, that gives you a certain number of replays. If you add 4 on top of that, it gives you more, 5 more, and 6 much more. Now, you can actually light up and achieve all 12 and the 13th rollovers, because the game has spotted numbers. And there are a variety of settings inside the game for the spotted numbers, and it can spot you either 1 or 2 numbers in a game. But this is handled through a spotting disc, not in the typical Bally sense, but it's a stepper, kind of like older style spotted number units, like in Bally's Bright Spot. The center lane will award you an automatic replay if you're playing for extra ball. So I didn't mention this, but you can play up to 6 extra balls. So you have up to 12 chances to get those lanes complete. Each extra ball is guaranteed, meaning you only have to press the extra ball button one time, and you are automatically awarded the extra ball. The extra balls are kind of cool because it will start the conveyor motor and only lift until that ball rolls over the ball count unit. And the ball count unit will increment and then decrement. It's pretty neat to watch and pretty unusual. So, as I say, my game is complete, and it is working, and I am really enjoying it. It's something quite different. So it's a nice change of pace, if I want to just play something different. But it is missing the locks on the head, on the front of the head, so I need to figure out some way to rig that up. It's missing the lock plates as well, so I should be able to put something together, but that's the only problem. But yeah, so that's Golden Nugget, and hopefully that'll be with me for a little while here. So, Dennis Kriesel of the Eclectic Gamers Podcast and I were talking the other day about a very interesting game, and I thought I would bring it up here and discuss it as the featured game for today. It is Daval's Gems, made in 1939. And Gems, at first glance, I was a bit confused. I thought there were 3 separate scoring types built into this game. There, on the left-hand side of the back glass is a column marked Ruby. On the right-hand side, there's a column marked Emerald. And then in the center, there is an oval marked Diamond, along with the title of the game. Up at the top of the back glass, there are the thousands, so that goes from 1,000 to 20,000. But on closer inspection, the left and right-hand columns are actually part of the default scoring below 1,000. So between 0 and 400 is the Ruby column. Between 500 and 900 is the Emerald column. So as you're incrementing the score with the bumpers on the playfield, it's going to move from the Ruby to the Emerald. And I believe what happens is when you're in the Ruby or the Emerald column, it's going to light up the same bumper type on the playfield. So on the playfield at the top, there's like a skill shot area with 3 different exits. The one in the center awards 1,000 points, and it only awards that, though, if diamonds are lit. On the left-hand side, there's the Ruby area, which, when lit, awards 1,000 points. And on the right-hand side, there's the Emerald area, which awards 1,000 points when hit. I believe all the bumpers award 100 points apiece. The playfield itself is a really interesting kind of reverse chevron pattern. As the ball goes down, there's bumper right in the center of the playfield. But these are the old-style spring bumpers before they settled on kind of the more modern pop style bodies, that didn't pop. They're passive bumpers. But these are spring style, so they have the carbon ring mounted in the front towards the player with a nail sticking up through the playfield, and as the ball hits the side of the spring, it will make contact with the nail with that carbon ring. Very finicky little setup, but it is very cool to see in action. There's nothing quite like it. So Junior had those as well, the game that just left for me. So going down the playfield, though, there's this 2 very interesting columns here, and knowing what these do requires looking under the playfield as well. I'm very thankful that the IPDB has quite a few different pictures of this playfield, both above and below, which gave me a good clue as to what was going on. There are magnets mounted under these little captive areas, and I'm not certain if these are captive areas or if the ball is supposed to fall into this area. But either there's a ball which is installed in each of these, and when there is a trigger at the rollover at the top, the magnets activate and kick the ball up into the captive ball up into the one that's sitting on the rollover and knock it off. I'm not certain if that's what happens or not. Another guess is that the magnets under the playfield are activated by the rollover switches, and as the ball travels down into that captive area, the magnets muster enough strength that it kicks the ball back up and out. In looking at this more closely, I have a feeling that those balls are captive, and there should be one ball installed on either side. And if a ball happens to land on the top, it hits this rollover, and the magnets will activate and kick the ball that's in the captive area up into the one which is stuck at the top. That just seems more feasible, but I don't know for sure. If anybody has this game, I would love to know or see some footage and see what's actually going on. There's 2 beautiful light towers which are mounted below these, and these light towers mark the bottom rollover as worth 1,000 points when lit. This is likely lit at various points on the 0 to 1,000 stepper, but where that might be, I don't know. So one other word about the captive areas, actually, those are marked that they score 1,000 when lit. Now, is that 1,000 for each switch in that captive area, or is it 1,000 for just the rollover at the top? I don't know. That's another question. This is a relatively low-scoring game, so I have a feeling that it's not going to be giving out those 1,000 points very easily. But then again, what do I know? Like I say, I would like to know if anybody has this game and if they would mind explaining some of the features. Unfortunately, the playfield, which is pictured well on the IPDB, does not have a good copy of the score and instruction card. There are some handmade cards which are pictured, especially in the Cashbox photo, but those don't really tell the picture. It looks like the operator of this one was using it as a 3-ball game, which I find very interesting. As far as the artwork on the playfield, I just love this deco period of artwork, especially in pinball. It's just so interesting and intriguing. The straight lines and the beautiful scroll work and other touches on the playfield, it's just very cool. In the back box, I'm curious where they display replays. This is not a payout game, and they must be displaying the replays somewhere, either through a projection unit, and I see on the back glass in one of the photos there are 2 circular spots. I have a feeling that one of those is going to be tilt, and the other is going to be the credits. But I'm curious what the large diamond sections are for right in the middle, and how you light the diamond rollovers in any case. Perhaps that's only at 0 it's lit, or maybe it's only every certain number of 1,000 points. I'm not sure. But anyway, I find this game to be beautiful and very intriguing, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it and maybe running across one in the future. So that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for joining me. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com. And if you're in the Houston area, August the 3rd, Ryan and I will be doing a planetarium presentation on Wayne Nyans and Coin-Op Carnival. I hope to see as many of you as can make it, and I look forward to that presentation very much, and hope you do as well. If you would like to follow me on Instagram, I'm at Bingo Podcast. I'm also on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can listen to me on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast via RSS, on Facebook. And you can also listen to me on my website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.